What's up, everyone? Welcome to this special edition, a solocast that's going to talk about the end of my plant medicine journey. And it's the end, not like an alcoholic who's never going to have a drink again, but the end of the path that I've currently been on, which is these larger scale trips, going down to Peru to drink ayahuasca, really looking to use the plant medicines as a primary tool to expand my consciousness. And I didn't know, I kind of thought this would be something that I would continue the rest of my life until, a recent ceremony where I realized I had gotten what I was looking for from these experiences. And in saying that, it's with a little bit of a twinge of, nostalgia and a little bit of sadness that I say that, but also excitement for the next path. But before we get into the end, which I'm sure is going to come as a bit of surprise because I've been talking about plant medicines for a long time, we'll start from the beginning, and I'll talk about kind of where I came from and what they've provided me, and then I'll go into this last ceremony here at the end. To help me get going here, I'm going to light up a mapacho, which is Peruvian tobacco. They call it chacaruna. Which translates to bridge. And so when you smoke the tobacco, it's helping you bridge the world of regular consciousness to the world of altered consciousness. But it's also pretty fun. And you smoke it like a cigar so it doesn't mess up your lungs. So the beginning was in my family, there was no real religious background and hardly any spiritual background. I mean, we didn't have a meditation practice. We didn't have a yoga practice. There was just general open-mindedness and practicality. And I went to high school in Texas, so I got exposed to a lot of, pretty basic Christian faith through my friends. And I got suckered into this church ski retreat, which didn't go well for the retreat or for me because they'd have these discussions. And I already knew enough to ask a lot of questions that they didn't like me asking. For example, asking questions about the Inquisition, because when I was 15, I got to go to Italy and I visited the dungeons of the Inquisition when I was out there and saw, to this day, some of the most horrifying examples of the capabilities of human behavior. I mean, I was shocked at what they came up with to torture people who were heretics, people who didn't believe in the Christian faith. And, the effects of those atrocities were so enormous that it made a huge impact and created a lot of animosity towards the Catholic and Christian faith that I carried with me for a long time. It took me a while to release that. It was just so obvious when you see that half of the devices involved torturing people's genitals that, you understood that there was just an expression. This was an expression of sadism, not an expression of any God that was worthy of worship. And that was something, and I studied philosophy of religion in university. I went to University of Richmond, and philosophy was one of my majors, and philosophy of religion was one of the most interesting topics. And what they always discussed was, not only should you believe, but is the God you believe in worthy of worship? Well, any God that would condone that kind of savagery on a human being or any kind of living thing is not a God that's worthy of worship. So I knew it was outside of my own criteria, inherently, instinctively outside of that. But it's kind of a long way to say that I had no religious background, no spiritual background. But in my family, there was a few journey people who had experimented with some plant medicines and were connected with a shaman who did some work in the mountains. And so after I graduated high school, I went off and visited that shaman. And she was a very sweet lady, and she brewed up a tea comprised mostly of mushrooms. And I drank the tea, and I had no idea what to expect. I mean, I was literally terrified. I mean, I'd smoked weed with my brothers one time and had some laughs and ate a bunch of food, and nothing spiritual, though. And I was still mostly in control. I was used to drinking. Again, I had 3 older stepbrothers, so I was drinking whiskey since I was like 11 or 12, which I don't condone, but that's what happens when you have 3 older brothers. So anyway, I was used to altered states, but not those kind of things. And I was terrified that I was going to completely lose control, lose my mind. I didn't know. So I picked up a rock from a dry stream bed and I held that rock with me. And I was like, this is going to be my anchor to reality. And I still have that rock to this day. It's been with me for 16 years now. And I always bring it for any kind of intense experience, whether it's whatever that's going on where I want some grounding. But anyways, so I had that experience, and when it hit its peak effects, I felt my body disappear, and I was traveling in this world of visionary imagination, a world that a lot of people call the astral world, seeing visions, learning things about my life, learning things about the universe, and doing so with an absolute disillusion of what I thought was self. And from there, I realized that I discovered something that would allow me to expand my knowledge, expand my consciousness, expand my understanding of not only myself, but the world at large. And it started to form the basis of an experiential spirituality, something that I could try out instead of just listening and saying like, oh yeah, so-and-so 2,000 years ago maybe said this. There's some translations that say maybe he said this, so believe this unequivocally. In my understanding, and my father was hyper rational, and I kind of carried that idea, that Aristotelian rationality with me, logic above all. I could put my theories to the test in my own experience, and if my own experience held them up true, and yeah, I understand that I have a subjective mind. My mind has fallacies, and it's not a perfect knowledge. But at least if I had experienced it and it was helpful to me, it was something that I would keep. And so that started me on the path. And I would go see this shaman for several more occasions, up through college and even out of college. Now, as soon as I got out of college, that was probably the darkest period in my life emotionally. Really challenging work life, really challenging, and really I lost touch completely with that spiritual connection. I didn't have any meditation practice. I didn't know about float tanks. I basically would occasionally get my hands on some mushrooms or something like that and do my own little ceremony and try and reconnect. But I was pretty disconnected. I was drinking pretty heavy. I was partying pretty hard, trying out some of the non-psychedelic drugs of the world and seeing how those suited me. They never really suited me that good for the most part, and was just trying to figure out my way, really, at that point. Then I, through a series of coincidences, found a place that I felt comfortable going to drink ayahuasca. And it ended up linking me up with a shaman, Maestro Orlando Chuandama, my first ayahuasca shaman. And this kind of coincided with about the conception of my ideas for On It. And so it was really good timing because I was transitioning out of a previous life, running a marketing company and partying heavy, and transitioning into this new thing, which was really where my heart was and where I was really passionate. And so in that first ayahuasca experience, which, I told on my third appearance on the JRE, I think it's JRE 127, still to this day, it's one of the ones that I get some of the most comments about. Because when I went on the JRE, after that experience, I was just totally lit up. I even recorded some silly video in the middle of the jungle that still gets a bunch of hits, and where I was just, my mind was completely blown with what I'd seen. And I wanted to record that because I was worried that I was going to forget it or something. But yeah, so I talked about that experience on the JRE. So for the full details, please give that a listen. It's pretty interesting to hear it. Not only what happened, but hear it from me in that frame of mind. Because I was still really kind of lit up from that experience. But ayahuasca was the first one to really directly attack my fears. Went over my fear of death, my fear of suffering, all of these fears it started to attack. And ayahuasca has continued to be an ally that's helped me do that consistently. And it also opened me up to the possibilities of other dimensions of consciousness, dimensions where you could have access to by far the highest capability of your own thoughts, your own imagination, your own planning. I mean, I was able to really literally see a vision of what on it could be if I made some changes and I straightened a few things out and I fixed a few things, and kind of guided everything in a certain direction. I was able to see like blood flowing easily into a heart, and incredible insights from that first trip to the jungle. So from there, I was hooked on exploring these different medicines. And my next big one was an Iboga Journey, which is probably the most uncomfortable experience of my life. And Iboga is harrowing. It's 36 hours of just rolling around in pure nausea, like blind. You can't even see. Your light sensitivity is so strong, you can't even see anything. Your heart's pounding because it's a stimulant. You can't sleep. Obviously, you're awake for 36 hours. Feels like you're stuck in a high voltage shed. You're impossibly nauseous. Your body hurts. But I experienced something in that really ties in. And how it happened, I was with a traditional Iboga shaman at that time. And Iboga is a root of an African shrub that grows naturally in Gabon. And it's gained a lot of popularity and notoriety for its ability to treat addiction. And some of the best heroin addiction rates in the world are coming out of ibogaine treatment, ibogaine being the active alkaloid in Iboga. But I didn't do it for heroin. I did it just for psychedelic exploration to see what I could learn. I'd read reports that you could ask Dr. Iboga, as it was called, and Dr. Iboga would answer direct questions. Ayahuasca presents answers to you generally in riddles and takes you largely where it wants you to go, or at least the way it wants you to go. So I was looking for Iboga to give me, some more direct answers, and it certainly did that. That was an incredible experience. But the important part of that I really want to bring up is when I was going into the experience, the traditional shaman I was with, at that time, he led me through a process. And before the medicine even kicked in, he had me lay down and he had me visualize. And he was saying, all right, Aubrey, see yourself on the moon. And I was looking at him and I was saying, okay, but the medicine hasn't kicked in yet. And he's like, no, just see the moon. See yourself on the moon. I was like, yeah, but the medicine hasn't kicked in yet. He's like, no, just do it. So finally, I just used pure imagination because my visionary aspect of the medicine hadn't opened up yet. So I just used my pure imagination. I saw myself on the moon. I was like, okay. It's like, someone's there to see you. And I'm like, I'm barely seeing the moon. I can't see anybody there who's there to see me. And he insisted. He just sat there with me and he insisted. He said, there's somebody on the moon who wants to talk to you. And so eventually, just using my imagination, all right, I saw my grandma. And then he said, she has something to tell you. And then we ended up having this dialogue way before the medicine even kicked in, purely on imagination. Imagination being the bridge that led me to access, whatever that encounter was, whether it was another aspect of my memory or whether it was my actual grandma. It doesn't matter. The truth that I gained from it was the same. And so after that whole experience, I was still not in the medicine, hadn't had any effects. I didn't feel anything. And he tapped me on the forehead and he said, remember, you don't need medicine to do this. And I smiled big because I realized that I'd done this, I'd spoken to my grandmother without the help of any medicine. And I never thought that was possible before. So that always stuck with me. But I still couldn't do that very well. And anyways, after that happened, the medicine kicked in. All of those terrible side effects happened. But I also had the most clarity in my mind I've ever had. And I told that story on the JRE. That story is on my blog as well. You can also read about all these experiences on my blog, aubreymarcus.com. Check it out if you're curious about the actual visions and the insights. I separated myself into 3 different characters. Mud Body, which was my physical self, Mind Boy, which was like the ego and the mind, and then my higher consciousness, God Self, whatever you want to call that, which was, the one who I wanted operating the starship, so to speak. So anyways, that was a powerful experience. And then I continued to do more ayahuasca. I discovered Wachuma, which was an amazing heart-opening medicine I did with Gandalf the White Wizard, put out a documentary about that. All of these medicines offering really different aspects and different teachings for me and have been some of the greatest allies and teachers in my life. I remember I was recently having a conversation with someone who's been consistently to therapy for the last, I don't know, 15 years. And he was asking, well, don't you think you would benefit from a therapist? And I was like, yeah, I've had a therapist. It's been the plants. Like, the plants have been my therapist. That's where I go and I converse with these imagination constructs or entities or allies, whatever you want to say. I don't get hung up in that kind of lingo. It can be whatever. But these teachers have been my therapist, been my instructors, been my teachers. And I've had great human teachers as well. And then I continue to do that. And up until this past year, I decided to take my practice to another step, which was to do something called a dieta. And a dieta is where you ask any kind of plant to basically, in the shamanic tradition, to take up residence within your own body and become a permanent teacher for you. And in order to do that, the plants test your worthiness. Now, this is all the traditional construct of what they believe. And the ayahuasca shamans will diet many, many plants where they invite these spirits in them, and then these spirits become allies for them. So they use the traditional trees like lapuna and all of the different plants that come from the Amazon as their allies. I am not really particularly connected to any of the Amazonian trees. I'm very connected to the plant rose, the flower rose. It's been something that's my family's always had rose gardens, and it's been significantly tied to the kind of maternal line in my family. And so I decided to do something a little bit unconventional and diet rose. And I did so with my good friend and also shaman, Hamilton Souther, who runs Blue Morpho Tours, which is an ayahuasca center down in Peru. And he's just a bad motherfucker. I mean, this dude is, he's put himself in the fire as many times as any human can stand in the amount of time that he's been on this earth, and has gained the wisdom from that, and also has the ability to really relate on a personal level. And so it's been a really key alliance for me to meet him. And I've had great shamans. Don Howard was amazing. Maestro Orlando was amazing. I've been very blessed with great shamans. And he's just a continuation of that line. My very first shaman was great as well. But anyway, so we engaged the diet with a couple ceremonies where we just invited Rose to be my teacher basically for the next 3 weeks. And it's an isolation diet. So you eat very clean. The first few days I was basically eating dry lettuce and dry chicken and dry rice, like no salt, no nothing, because you stay very neutral and very clean, and you're just in communion with the spirits. And then I went in isolation in British Columbia, where I was writing my book and just meditating every day. And one of the really interesting things about that process was my field of vision was opened up to a degree like I've never experienced. Like, I would go to rest and close my eyes and meditate, and it was full on psychedelic visions. But I was able to maneuver within those. And at the same time, I had been practicing something called the sacred silence meditation. And in doing that, I'd created what's called a medicine space, which is your space in the astral world. And again, when I say the astral world, just think of it as like your imagination, or the collective imagination, more appropriately. So the astral is the collective imagination of everybody that you're accessing through your imagination. So if you want to sub out in your own mind imagination for astral, because that's more comfortable, no worries. It's the same thing. So in the astral world, I created this medicine space, and everybody's medicine space is unique to them. And when it stops changing, at a certain point, as you imagine it, it'll stop changing. And then it's there and it's real. It's like you've created an actual space, like you're a video game developer and you've created your own world. It's there. It exists in pixels and memories and synapses that have formed actually in your brain. So it actually does exist, because when memories are formed and when imagination is formed, it's actually the forming and the collection of different neurons in your brain to create that memory. And when you access it, you recall it and it becomes fresh again and able to be changed. But certain things will stick, and those certain things will stick as you create this medicine space. So if you want to create your own medicine space, get into a deep meditation and just start imagining the most beautiful place you've ever imagined in your life, and the place that you'd want to hang out with. And it doesn't have to follow any rules. I mean, I have pretty much every natural phenomenon within what seems like a half-mile plot in my medicine space, because why not? It's imaginary. You can have a waterfall flowing upwards if you want, whatever. Do whatever you want. It's your space. You don't have to follow Newtonian physics in your medicine space. But anyway, so I'd created that. And I would go there and I would have these incredibly intense visions. And I talk about some of those visions in my recent podcast with Dr. Dan, and learning how to deal with the entities that I would encounter there. And, at first you want to fight them, but it doesn't work to fight them. So you have to find your ways to maneuver and deal with these forces that are coming at you. And so I learned those tricks and, encountered both demons and friends in this astral space, and learned how to kind of navigate those waters. But it was incredibly, incredibly intensely visual. And this was on no medicine. I mean, I'm just eating clean, writing a book, and hanging out. So I finished that up, and I still hadn't been in contact with anybody physically. I mean, obviously there was people who I was dealing with when I got my food, but for the most part, I was all by myself and meditating a lot and writing a lot. And then I go to close the diet. And to close the diet, I go back to see Hamilton. And Hamilton lives in Colorado, so you do, cannabis is legal in Colorado. So we had a intense cannabis ceremony. And at that point, I was expecting to just kind of coast home on this, because I'd done a lot of heavy lifting with this diet. I'd battled astral snakes and learned how to master them. I'd encountered all of these demons, and I felt like, man, I really did a lot of hard work. I'd been in communication with Rose. The Rose plan had taught me so many amazing things, and I felt really good. I thought I was just coast home, close this out. I had my girl Whitney coming to see me the next day. You can't have sex or masturbate during the diet either. So that's super intense. You're not even supposed to think about it, because imagination is the same as actuality. So you're not supposed to imagine eating bad food or imagine having sex. That was going pretty well till about day 17, when I full on had a sex dream. But I think that's pretty normal for the diet. It's hard to control your dreams. Although I do remember one dream where I consciously stopped myself. I thought I gave myself some bonus points for that. But it is challenging, especially like Joe Rogan says, you got packages that need to be shipped out of the factory down there in your balls, and when they get backed up, things can get a little challenging. But so yeah, I went with the went ahead with the closing of the diet, super optimistic. And the goal for that diet, the closing ceremony, the intention was to bring consciousness at large inside the physical body, and seemed like a reasonable intention to have. But I don't think either of us, neither me nor Maestro Hamilton, really understood the intensity of what that would mean. And also, I think I'd still had a bit of the intensity of your experience equals the dose of the medicine that you take. I still had that kind of paradigm in my head. So I knew we weren't doing much. So I was like, nah, it'll be fine. It'll be easy. But it was far from that. It was by far the most intense, most challenging ceremony experience of my life, because pretty quickly, and Hamilton is really amazingly good at calling in a lot of energy, and he started singing his Icaros. And actually, you can hear some samples of those Icaros on my last podcast, the special Hamilton Souther podcast that I recently put out, I think number 61. But he started calling those in, and everything showed up. Everything in the imagination or in the astral, it all showed up. And it was all trying to take root within our bodies. And one of the things I realized at that point was that consciousness is not just the good stuff. Consciousness as creation is all things. It's all the death, all the destruction, all of the pain, all of the suffering, as well as all of the good, all of the love, all of the positive aspects, all of the creation. Consciousness is neutral. It's all of that. It's a cycle. It's the yin and the yang. It's the interplay of both. Without the death and destruction, there can be no creation in life. You know, without suffering, there's nothing to juxtapose to show pleasure. The game of free will wouldn't exist unless there was an equal representation on both sides of the spectrum. So what we were asking for, what I was asking for in my own mind was I was asking for, oh, I want the good parts of consciousness to take roots in me. And the universe was like, bitch, you're getting all of it. You want consciousness? You have to take all of it. So at that point, it was terrifying because all of the darkness of humanity, all of the darkness of the world was awakening inside of me, as well as all of the light. And that's way too much for me to hold. I couldn't deal with it. I mean, and I think, you know, I don't consider myself a shaman, and I'm not trying to, you know, say that I have a great capacity or anything, but it's a lot to hold, because to own that all of the darkness of humanity is a part of yourself is really, really heavy. And not only that, to see that there is a beauty in all of that too. There's a beauty in the unraveling as well as a beauty in the creation, if looked at from the perspective of pure consciousness, that it is both a part of necessity. You know, so necessity is what creates beauty. Like, form follows function. You know, the function is necessary. The function is beautiful. And, you know, it's like when you see something slow motion, you know, exploding, like a bullet going into a pressurized glass balloon or something, and the shattering, it's beautiful at that moment, even though it's destructive. But it was also really, really fucking intense. And I really felt like at that point, there was a couple options. Really only two options. One of the options was to be terrified. And if I chose the path of fear, I literally think I would have gone insane. I think I would be curled up in a ball under this table right now, shaking, traumatized, PTSD, in fear, right? The other option, to escape the fear, because the fear was there, it was terrifying. All of the darkness, all of the light, everything trying to take root in my body. The other option to the fear was to embrace the fear in a weird power way, was to choose power, right? To just become the darkness. And that was this kind of weird, seductive moment where it was like, oh, I can escape the fear by becoming fear, by owning that elemental force of power, of fear, of power. But that was in itself a revolting choice to me. But really, it was just a choice. It was not like I was inherently one way or the other. I was everything at that point. So it was a choice. I could choose to embrace that fear, or I could choose the other side. And the other side was love. And that was by far the most stable aspect. And with that, faith that everything was going to be okay, that I was going to be okay, that love was going to hold. So it was this interesting binary decision between fear or faith that I was going to be okay, or fear that I was going to go crazy, or and then love, which was stable and felt amazing. And I'm talking about any love, like love of a family, love of a girlfriend, love of a puppy, love of just fucking hanging out with your homies watching football, like love of going to a UFC fight, whatever, any kind of love, didn't matter. Any kind of like thing that was real love and passion, that was stable. Everything else was like, had a wobble to it, like a weird wobble. So I knew that was the right path out. And that's what felt the best. But it was love versus power and fear versus faith. And ultimately what this experience taught me was that really everything we have is just a choice. And it's not that we have to prove that we're inherently good or prove that we're inherently bad, like trying to figure out what we are internally. Like, I really think we're all of it. And we just decide what we choose to express. And that's enough. You know, if you have fucked up thoughts, that's okay. The world has fucked up thoughts. Humanity has fucked up thoughts. You know, that is in the quantum field of all of everyone's thoughts. That's part of the astral. That's part of imagination. That's part of consciousness, these fucked up thoughts. Your choice not to act on those, your choice to act on the feelings of love, to exercise your right to have faith that things are going to be okay, that's enough. So really, fundamentally, we are just beings with access to everything that use one tool, and that's choice. And so at the end of all of these experiences, it got really, really simple. Like I've been looking for all of these different philosophies, and really it became so simple that it was, we are everything. I am consciousness. Not I am consciousness. I am consciousness. And what I choose is who I will be. And love and faith was by far the most rewarding and best choice. And that's what I used to navigate me out of that situation. And I think those are the tools to navigate out of any challenging situation. You might not be able to change your physical situation, but you can change your internal situation by utilizing those tools and latching on to those two elements. Or you can indulge fear and embrace power, and you are going to be down a real slippery slope there. And to me, it's a very clear choice and very simple. So in realizing that, not only how intense the experience got, but just how simple everything got at the very brink, where I felt like for the first time I was actually anteing up my sanity to get this lesson. I'd anteed up everything. There was a clear path where I would have been seriously fucked up. And then there was a clear path where I would have been, really strengthened and supported. And I was able to choose that path. But it also gave me a little bit of warning about this plant medicine path. Obviously I hadn't been confronted with something this intense for forever. I've been confronted with intense things, my own death, myself being nothing, but not, I guess the most intense fear for me was that I wasn't inherently all good. I wasn't a good person. And confronted with the idea that I am everything and I am just what I choose, that ultimate kind of understanding was by far the most intense and the most illuminating as well. And it really liberated my ability to just utilize choice. And that's the true nature of free will, is to exercise the element of choice. We can give up our free will really, really easily. We can just go on momentum and the harangues of our own mind and these programs and thoughts that are be running through our head. We can choose to indulge those, and then we give up our free will. Or we can get quiet and utilize choice to decide what mood we're in, to decide how we're going to interact with the world. I think obviously there's going to be external factors. I'm talking about something like mood. Like, yeah, your hormones may be fucked up one day, something may have happened, but nonetheless, you still have choice. Like, that's something that's inherently our birthright. And that was the final lesson for me in these plant medicines. So, with that, I still had an ayahuasca journey scheduled at Blue Morpho. And I knew after that ceremony, closing out the diet, that I was done with the plant medicines. But I had a lot of good friends and a lot of close allies and family going to the plant medicine. So I drank ayahuasca another 3 times, and it was nice. I definitely had a good experience. It was great medicine, really high performance of the art at Blue Morpho, and I highly recommend anybody looking to do ayahuasca, definitely check them out. And if it resonates with you, great. The other place, of course, is the Spirit Quest Sanctuary with Don Howard. Both of those places, you're going to have a very good experience. But just go with what calls to you. And of course, if you want to see my first shaman, I have links to his place up there as well. But be careful, because there's a lot of charlatans out there, and there's a lot of people with mixed intentions. People who will want to act in a predatory manner, set you up for situations where they're getting more money from you or more energy from you, or, getting you a little bit well, but also a little bit sick. So you're stuck and kind of tied to them. And I think that's not only with shamans, that's with psychiatrists and psychologists. You know, you got to find the good ones. You got to find the white wizards, not the gray wizards, and not the, of course, not the dark wizards. Please stay away from them. It's not going to end well if you end up in their clutches, you know, but know that you can still exercise choice no matter what. Like choice is our true inalienable right. At least choice to our own minds, our own hearts, and whether we choose love over power, or whether we choose faith over fear. So with that all getting so simple, I knew I'd kind of done. I went and did ayahuasca, and you know, it's not like I said, it's not like I'm an alcoholic that I'm scared of the plants and I don't want to, you know, and I don't want to touch them, because it's not like that. You know, as I said, I drank ayahuasca a few more times, and I've had a few other experiences, and I'm sure throughout my life, you know, I'll still pay my visits with the plants, and we'll hang. But the way that I was approaching it as a primary tool for expanding my consciousness, that's done. And I'd be surprised if, you know, I may do ayahuasca again, especially if I'm bringing some close friends and, you know, I want to be a part of the experience and it's offered there. Sure, why not? But as far as the journey for myself, I consider that closed with that final lesson, with that final gift of choice. And also the understanding that, like that Iboga shaman told me, I have the tools now to have as vivid a psychedelic visionary experience and as illustrative and educational an experience without any medicine now, that it doesn't really make any sense. Like, for an example, I was on the plane ride home from Sedona, and Sedona is a really great place for me to heal and get connected. And so I was hiking mountains and hanging out and having fun in Sedona. I was on the plane ride home, and I put on some binaural beats that Corey made that we're going to release soon on the web, and just started to connect with that imagination, with the astral world. And I went to my medicine space, and I created this little baby Thunderdome in the medicine space. And in there, I go to see if any different kind of entities want to meet me. And this is on a plane ride. It's morning. It's, you know, early. The only psychoactive substance I had was a little bit of coffee, and I'm just meditating, eyes closed, on a packed airplane, Southwest Airlines. And I go in there in my own imagination, in my own mind. I go into my little cave, which has these kind of white, shiny walls. And this gigantic pearlescent white dragon shows up. And I'm looking at this dragon going, whoa, I didn't expect to see this thing in here. And then I looked down at myself, and it wasn't myself as I am now, but it was like my 6-year-old self. You know, it was like my childhood self interacting with this dragon. And I started to engage in a dialogue with this white pearlescent dragon as my 6-year-old self. And it was, you know, pretty personal, the kind of things that we were talking about, and, you know, things having to do with my family and my father. But it was everything that I could have imagined or wanted from a traditional ayahuasca experience was there. I was encountering a giant pearl dragon in this fantastic, you know, creation in my own imagination as my childhood self, getting incredible wisdom. Eventually, my childhood self merged with my adult self, and we were, you know, I was talking to the dragon, and the lessons just continued. And again, they're a little bit personal. But the final lesson that you said, you know, are you ready? And I said, you know, well, I'm not quite ready yet. You know, I still have some work to do and things like that. And he said, okay. He's like, and then he kind of got quiet, and I was like, all right, I'm going to leave now. So I go to turn and walk out of this little cave that I'd created in my imagination, in my medicine space. And the dragon goes and he bites the whole top half of my body, just from my waist up, just shunk. I was like, oh, fuck. I was like, this isn't good. And I've been attacked by these entities in my own imagination before. So I was trying those usual tricks, but the dragon was really tenacious, right? He was like not letting go of my body, and it wasn't pleasant. The dragon was definitely an ally. So I knew he was teaching me something, but my usual methods of appearing as invincible and connecting being one with creation and, not trying to fight. And it wasn't quite working right. And so at that point, I had an instinct to just fully emerge as the ultimate self that I was capable of being, my supremely, the supreme culmination of everything that I could be as a being of consciousness, and manifest that, not see myself as me, this limited meat vehicle that has, that farts when he eats too much fucking uncooked broccoli and has all these different issues that that I deal with, and that's part of being alive, but identify with that highest part of myself, pure consciousness at its ultimate potential, and express that through my imagination. So I did it, boom, and I blew up into this super big blue being. And at that point, that didn't make sense. I was way bigger than the dragon. So it didn't even make sense that the dragon could be biting off half of my body. I mean, he could bite off half of my physical body if I was just showing to him as Aubrey Marcus, 6'3", whatever I'm coming to him as, but as this giant blue being, coming to him in that way, as the full expression of my own imagination of what I was capable of. That was a different story. And the dragon just looks at me and smiles and told me, he was like, "You're ready." I was like, "Fuck yeah." And that day, like, I was one of, I get in little funks and emotional things, like I think everybody does, stress and different things come up, but fuck, that felt good. And that was all just from meditation on an airplane, because like that shaman said, you don't need the plants to do that. But I do credit the plants 100% with showing me the way. Again, I was like an angry, slightly agnostic, but more vehemently angry atheist before this plant medicine journey. I was not meditating. I didn't care about any of this shit. The plants built the bridge. They showed me the way. They were the shakaruna, like this tobacco that I was talking about. They were the bridge to the astral world, to consciousness, to imagination. And now that I've been taught that, 14 sessions of ayahuasca, 6 sessions of wachuma, iboga, Cambo, all of these crazy things that I've done. Don't do Cambo, that's a bad one. But all of these crazy things I've done, countless psilocybin, it showed me the way, and now I know the way, and I don't need the bridge anymore. I've formed my own bridge with my own imagination and my own constructs, and I can use tools like holotropic breathing or shamanic breathing, like I was talking about with Anahata. I can use binaural beats. I can use meditation. I can use float tanks. And so it's not that I don't respect the plant. I love the plants. The plants have been my homies. Like, they're amazing, amazing teachers, amazing allies. And surely I'll hang out with them throughout the rest of my life from time to time. But the utilization of them on the path that I was currently on is changed, because I understand what's at the very base, and what's at the very base is choice. And I understand that I can get to those states without them. And sometimes people they fall too far in love with the bridge itself, because the bridge comes with these fireworks, and it comes with these things that are happening in your mind that are beautiful, but it also comes with a cost. It's tough on the body to do these plants all the time. I mean, it's stressful, and it comes with risk too. It's a challenging experience. It's tempering yourself in fire, and if you're too brittle and you choose to embrace fear and you allow that to happen, the strike, the hammer strike of the universal smith, schwack, it's either going to make the steel stronger and fold it, or it's going to break it. And you're going to have to go back in the fire and start from scratch, back to molten steel, and then come back and try and reforge that sword. So, I mean, I have great respect for the plants and that path, and I wouldn't be here, 100% would not be here without them. But for me, the next phase is going to be to exercise choice and use all the tools that I mentioned before to try and continue to learn. I'm always going to be learning. I'm master of absolutely nothing. I'm 100% a student, just still learning about the world and consciousness and my potential and what I can be. But the tools that I choose to teach me have shifted a bit. And that's just my own personal choice. And I thought it was worth sharing with everybody in this experience. So, wherever you are in that journey, whether the plants call to you, whether the plants have been calling to you, understand that just be fluid with your mind and your heart and your thoughts and what you want to do. Be careful with the path you choose. But if you do choose it, do so without fear. Because if you go to it and you choose faith over fear and you choose love over power, you'll get out all right, no matter what it is. So know that. And no matter where you've been, no matter what's happened, you have the power of choice. No one can take that from you. So hold that close, choose what you want, and see what you're called to. And that's pretty much the message that I have at the end of the line here. So thanks for tuning in and following me along this path. And I look forward to continuing to hear from you guys and all the different journeys that you're on. And I got a bunch of books coming out and a bunch of different things that'll describe a lot of these journeys, a lot of things that I haven't shared. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So much love, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.